Do you feel as though the world is changing so fast that you're struggling to keep up? Are you feeling exhausted from just fighting to keep the lines between home and work from just completely blurring? Now, as a leader, are you finding that the well-being and the effectiveness of your employees has become all of a sudden a very, very important and critical business issue? If you said yes to any of those, you're definitely not alone. The whole world is going through massive transformation in the way we work and a massive amount of stress, fatigue, and burnout. In fact, 2020 was listed as the most stressful year in most working professionals' lives. Extremely, extremely stressful. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that what's happened since the beginning of the pandemic is we've essentially shifted the paradigm of work. We've shifted from an old paradigm, which was largely face-to-face interactions, face-to-face work, to a more new paradigm, which is virtual interactions, remote work. It's characterized by physical spaces and virtual workspaces. And in the process of this transition, it's caused a lot of people to really struggle to keep up, adapt, and avoid completely burning out. But one of the things that we've also come to really realize during this transition is that human wellness, human well-being, and our happiness and effectiveness at home and work are intrinsically related. That means if we're not feeling very well, if we're not taking care of our health, our well-being, we're not taking care of our team's well-being and their health, their effectiveness at work significantly can be impaired. Now, this is something that we all kind of knew prior to the pandemic, but now that we've all kind of been going through this as a collective, the whole world, it's really started to sink in the importance of taking care of well-being and wellness. Now, each of you, well, you all probably struggle from one of three areas in terms of your own well-being and your own essentially happiness and effectiveness that come as a result of that. One is on a personal level. The second is on a leadership level in terms of if you have a team of people that you work with. And then for others of you, it's a more of an organizational level. If you have a whole organization of people working for you, whole divisions perhaps, you're going to find that your workplace wellness culture, retention, all of that is intrinsically affected by their well-being and what they're all going through right now. So today we're going to be touching on three areas, each a little bit, to give you some tools on how you can take care of each one of them, whether it's yourself, your organization, or your individual leads, individual team members. So we're going to start off with you. And fundamentally, you are probably stressed to your limit, right? You've been working like crazy, that you've been struggling to keep the lines between home and work from blurring. Some of you are parents, perhaps, and you've been having to homeschool your students. Perhaps you're working at home and you're getting texts and emails all through the night, all through the weekend. And at the same time, you have to run a whole household. It's extremely, extremely challenging. A lot of you are dealing with physical discomfort. Maybe your back is getting tired, your eyes are getting fatigued, you're having constant headaches. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that you haven't probably had much physical activity, physical movement, because you've been spending so much time sitting down in a chair, working, just trying to thrive and adapt as we go through this transformation. And then many of you are also probably suffering from isolation, with the lockdowns that have affected people all over the world, every community. We haven't been able to do what we wanted to do, interact with the people that we care about, see our friends, relatives, and that can have a tremendous amount of negative adverse effect on our well-being, which affects our effectiveness at work and our overall happiness. Here's an interesting statistic that kind of supports that idea. And this is, although this is an American statistic, this can really affect essentially people all over the world. And what this statistic says, that 42% of Americans gained undesirable weight during this pandemic, right? Literally 1 out of every 2 people gained excess weight. And the average was 29 pounds. And you can imagine the physical, mental, and emotional discomfort and challenges adding that much weight unwillingly can have on an individual, right? And it's just here to illustrate the point that yes, we may not have realized the physical ramifications of the pandemic on our, but it's really, really paying a toll. The second thing to focus on is the health and well-being of your people, right? The people who are directly under your report. And the first thing to accept is that they are also going through the exact same thing you are, if not worse, right? Who knows what their family situation is, but they are trying to navigate this pandemic just as you are, whether you're a leader, a professional, team manager, or runner of a whole organization, and they are burning out. You know, one of the things that really affect a lot of professionals that are probably under your is an excessive workload, because a lot of people have been taking early retirement because of the stresses of the pandemic. They go, you know, this is a great time to kind of step away. Others have had to step back in and take a little bit more time off, a little bit more break, because they're fatigued and they're exhausted. And what that does is it increases the workload on those who remain. And then many companies have cut back on their hiring, trying to figure out how to do more with less people. All that leads to excess work on less people, which is exhausting when you combine it with everything else that is going on. Another big thing is people being emotionally drained. These are some of the people you're trying to reach to with your technology, right? A lot of the frontline workers are emotionally drained because they are dealing with the actual death and destruction and the pain that so many of our countrymen and fellow citizens around the world are going through, right? And so it's emotionally draining. And then ultimately people are exhausted. 49% of people are concerned about in-person interaction. And this is a very important statistic to keep in mind as you perhaps start to make plans to move back to your offices, away from perhaps completely remote work, or just to introduce a little bit more of a hybrid model of work, a little bit at home, a little bit at the office. And although you, as an individual, as a leader, as a professional, may be completely comfortable going back, you have to realize that many of your colleagues and maybe the people that you're looking after are not. Maybe they have people who are sick or immunocompromised at the home, right? So they're much more reticent in terms of going back to the office. So if you do go back, their well-being, their emotional well-being, their mental well-being, which is directly affected by how they feel about returning to work, is an important thing to keep in mind, okay? The third area that we're going to be covering is in terms of your organization, right? One of the big challenges that many organizations have, many companies, whether they're a healthcare company or a technology company, is retention. They call it the mass resignation. A lot of people have decided to go, you know what? I'm going to look after my health and well-being because I can't sustain this level of effort, keeping the lines between home and work from, I can't sustain it. I'm going to step away. I'm going to find a culture that's going to be a little bit less taxing on me and a little less pressure. And then maybe they'll take a little bit more care of my well-being. This directly affects you as the leader of an organization, because if you have all these people leaving, you have to still achieve your business goals while at the same time dealing with less and less people. So well-being is a fundamentally powerful element in helping build a culture that shows the employees that they care and they're much more likely to stay, or increases their chances to stay. Here's a statistic that kind of supports that. 76% of respondents to this particular survey put out by Oracle believe their company should be doing more to protect their mental health. And that means things like mental well-being apps, or perhaps on-call or mental health professionals that they can access. These are just different tools that an organization can look to ensure that their employees feel that they're taken care of, right? And they're much more likely to stay. Perhaps they'll be more effective at work. And ultimately, that'll help you more likely achieve your ultimate business goals. And these are some of the things that we're going to be covering today. But before we do that, I want to tell you a little bit about myself so you can understand where I'm coming from. So I've been in the health and wellness industry for about 20 plus years. To do that, I've been a health and fitness trainer in 3 countries, Canada, the Dominican Republic, and the United States. I brought to market a product that was designed to make people who sit at the office healthier. That's the product that you see there, called SItflow. And we spent 9 years of our lives bringing that to market. So I understand a lot about the intricacies of entrepreneurship, the startup world, or bringing healthcare or healthy to people. And then lastly, I've conducted workshops and trainings on how to use the human body and the mind to achieve business goals, because ultimately your human body and your mind is your most powerful tool to have, because they control everything else. Okay. That's my professional background. My background is that, I've had burnout. During the process of bringing SItflow to life, it was 9 years of my life. I co-founded the company. I essentially pushed myself to the limit, right? 14, 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, sometimes 7. I pushed away pretty much everyone who cared for me, lost a lot of my relatives in terms of relationships, pushed away relationships. My physical condition completely deteriorated despite knowing everything I know about health and well-being. And it all culminated about 9 years later in 2018, in the summer of it. It was the summer of 2018, around June. I found myself sitting on a beach in Chicago, a city beach, and I had 4 bottles of wine, and I was just drinking them midday, trying to drown my sorrows away. I just completely burnt out. Okay. And fortunately, I was able to pull myself out of that. But today, what I want to do is share with you some tools and some strategies that combine my professional experience with my personal experience to help you avoid a lot of these pitfalls that can happen: burnout from overwork, from trying to work as crazy as you can to adapt to a new normal. And hopefully you can avoid a lot of the pitfalls and then also enhance the well-being as well, which makes great business sense. Now, one thing I should tell you is that before we begin, this program is not about the best diet, the best program to take. You can pick up a magazine and figure that out. What this program is about addressing unique health issues that are unique to hybrid work problems, right? Unique problems that are directly related to hybrid work. And so when we do that, we're going to cover 4 things today. Number 1, I'm going to share with you how to create a healthy home office, but a lot of what I share with you there can be transferred into a actual physical workspace when you go back to the work spot. I'm going to share with you how to reduce Zoom fatigue, because virtual meetings like this, virtual presentations, are here to stay. Next, I'm going to share with you how to have better online meetings. I did a workshop not too long ago for a biotech company, and what I do is I talk to all the participants prior to the workshop, and I ask them, what do you want to learn? What are your biggest challenges with perhaps the subject we're talking about, online meetings? And what they said is that fundamentally their biggest challenge with hybrid work, with remote work, was online meetings. It's just that they were poorly done. There's too many of them, and they were just exhausting. And it just drove them crazy, and it actually reduced their engagement within the company and their physical well-being, because they just sat there for a long period of time. So that's an important thing to cover. And then lastly, we're going to cover how to build a culture of well-being. Now, obviously, we can't cover everything in super depth, but I hope to share with you some valuable tools here that will help at least start the conversation within your organization, or at least give you some tips that you can apply right away. That said, we're going to start with creating a healthy home office. Now, generally when I make slides, I try not to put too much information on here, but the reason why there's a lot of information, a lot of words on this particular slide, is it's meant to be used as essentially a checklist, a buying list of things that you need to create an environment that will support your well-being. And so perhaps if you want to take a screenshot of this, that would be a great thing to keep around as you design your healthy home office. Now, when we think about a healthy home office, I want you to think about 2 fundamental principles. The first principle is based around the saying that first we build our environments, and then our environments build us. Or in other words, first we shape our environments, and then our environments shape us. And what that essentially is, that the environment around us, our built environment, has a significant impact on our behavior. Right? That's the first thing I want you to think about. The second thing I want you to think about is based around this saying, and it's environment trumps willpower. I'll say it again. Environment trumps willpower. And the reason why that is important is to say that, every morning you wake up, you have essentially a cup of willpower, right? And you have to apply that cup of willpower to everything that you do, whether it's work, whether it's home, whether it's taking care of your kids, whether it is looking after elderly, or whatever it might be. And you have a finite source of it. And perhaps by the time it comes to taking care of your health or your well-being, you've already run out of your what is it called? Your willpower cup. You've run out of your willpower cup and you have nothing left, even though you have the best intentions, right? And this is where environment comes in. If you can create an environment that supports the behaviors that you want, it'll reduce reliance on willpower to take care of your well-being. And so today, I'm going to share with you 8 steps to a healthy home office. Now, the first step is to build or to purchase a stand desk or get a monitor raising or adjustable height monitor raising platform that allows you to create a sit-stand desk option. Now, during the 9 years that it took to bring our product to life, we just spent so much time researching why sitting is bad. 9 years of research saying why prolonged bouts of sitting is bad for the human body. After 9 years of research, it basically says because the human body was not designed to sit for prolonged periods of time. It was actually, in fact, designed to move. But modern wisdom suggests that, or conventional wisdom says that, well, if you sit for a long period of time, you got to take a break and go for a walk. But that's counter to how the human body was created. In fact, we were designed to move, take breaks of sitting, right? Not the inverse. But that doesn't really necessarily work in a modern industrial world where so many people rely on jobs that require them to sit for a prolonged period of time. We need to come up with a solution, right? And another conventional wisdom that came up, okay, what is the solution to prolonged bouts of sitting is to stand, right? But that's not right either. Because if you think about professions like someone who works at a grocery store, or perhaps a bank teller, or someone who works in manufacturing, they stand all day long. And what they're told to do by occupational therapists or people in that profession who look after the well-being of people who stand a lot is they're told to sit down and take breaks. So clearly sitting isn't the answer either. So that becomes, what is the answer? Well, it's a combination of all three. It's a combination of sitting, standing, and movement. And that's why a sit-stand desk becomes a crucial component to any type of workplace, especially remote. Okay? So I would challenge you to purchase one of those. The second thing I would challenge you to do is to position your computer, your sit-stand deck workstation next to a window like I have right here. And there's two benefits to it. One is a health benefit and one is actually a professional benefit. From the health benefit, well, if you sit next to a window, you're much more likely to get access to natural light, the vitamin D that comes from, and that's fantastic, right? That'll make you feel better, boost your mood, you get more vitamin D, right? And if the window opens and closes, fresh air. That's the health benefit of it. That's much going to give you more energy, make you feel more alive and well. But from a professional perspective, what it's also going to do is going to enable you to better give remote presentations, have better remote meetings, communicate better in a remote setting. And this is why. When we are face-to-face with someone, people can look at our body language, and there's a lot of nuance, communication nuance that comes from nonverbal body language that we can see when we're in front of somebody. But when we are online, when we are on remote, all that disappears. And all we mostly see is someone sitting down and we see their face in front of the camera. Now, when that face is not well lit, we can't see their facial expressions. And in a remote type setting, facial expressions are essentially a component of body language that we have to use to help emphasize our message. Because imagine if I talked to you like this the entire time, my face never moved, the muscles in my face never moved, and this is how I talk to you. It's very difficult to listen to me for a prolonged period of time, let alone retain what I'm saying. So if you position yourself in front of a natural light, in front of a window, the natural light will hit your face, at least in the daytime, and then it'll accentuate your facial expressions. So you'll be better able to get your message across to the people that you're speaking to. So that's the second tool. The second is to use a compression mat for underneath your feet. Okay, I told you in tactic 1 to stand, sit, and move. For the periods that you're standing, you want to reduce the stress that is being put into the joints of your body and your back that's coming from the ground by using a compression mat. And all a compression mat is going to do is just place it underneath your feet, and it'll just reduce that load, less pressure on your joints, and you'll be able to stand for a little bit longer without feeling uncomfortable. Okay. The next thing is a cooking timer. A cooking timer, any type of timer that you can set for 45 minutes of work and 5 to 15 minutes of break. And what the cooking timer will do will be a natural reminder without you having to remember to get up every hour, 2 hours. It'll be a natural reminder that goes ding, 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 ding to get up and move. And what you'll benefit from that is it's going to take pressure off your body, and that movement is going to give more oxygen to your brain, and it's going to make you actually help you to think clearer, and you'll feel much better. So that's a very powerful tool to use, a cooking timer. Next is to get a blue light blocking app for your computer, or get blue light blocking sunglasses or glasses if you don't want to get the app. And one of the things that happens is when you sit and look at a computer all day long, in some respects, it's like looking at a flashlight, not to the exact same degree, but you're just staring at a light source. And that can be fatiguing in your eyes. That's why so many people go like this. Oh my goodness, my eyes hurt. I have a headache from staring at the screen all day. A blue light blocker, whether it's an app or a set of glasses, will help reduce the strain that's on your eyes and just reduce that pressure that you're feeling that can lead to a lot of the migraines, the discomfort, and the general feelings of malaise. Next, I would challenge you to get an ergonomic chair and an exercise ball. An ergonomic chair and an exercise ball. So for the last 2 months, I've been traveling around the United States and Canada, staying at different hotels, staying at different Airbnbs, and I've been working remote. And one of the things that I don't really have control over during this time is the type of chair that I use. And oftentimes at these hotels or at these Airbnbs, the chair is just some sort of a kitchen table that's hard, it's wooden, it's really ultimately uncomfortable, especially if you sit in it for a prolonged period of time, right? Because these chairs weren't designed for that. And they stress essentially, or they emphasize the importance of having the right type of sitting device for when you do sit. And there's 2 things that you need. Number 1 is an ergonomic chair. That's a given. And the second, I would challenge you to get a stability ball, a physiotherapy ball. And you use that on occasion just to kind of activate the muscles of your body, around your spine, right? It's just a little bit of fun, incorporate a little bit more movement into your day. And it's just a great addition to an ergonomic chair. Now, I wouldn't say get a stability ball and use it all the time, because when you use one, to use it properly, you have to sit up straight. And when you sit up straight, the muscles around the spine activate to keep your body in line, right? To keep your spine in line. But if you sit there for too long, just like any muscle activation and muscular activation, the muscles will fatigue. Eventually, you'll fall into poor posture, and it becomes a very negative tool. It doesn't help you anymore. So just using that as an exercise tool is a great idea. The next thing I would challenge you to do is to have a water bottle nearby. Always have access to water, because if it's close by, you're much more likely to drink it. And there's actual research behind this. So there's this gentleman by the name of Brian Wansink, and he is a researcher on nutrition and behavior at Cornell University. And he did this research on water consumption. And he did it at West Point Military Academy. And the purpose of the research was to find a way to increase the water consumption of the cadets at lunch. Now, they had 2 test groups, essentially. The first test group, the test was conducted in the lunchroom, and you can imagine just a giant room with lots and lots of essentially banquet tables with chairs on the sides, or picnic tables, side by side, just a giant room full of students, right? And traditionally, what they would do is whenever they were thirsty, they would have to stand up, walk to the side of the room where the water fountain was, where they could get the water, right? And they only drank so much. But what Wansink did is he did a test. And instead of having the students get up and go get the water, what he did is he had pitchers placed on the tables, and he would have people walk by and fill those pitchers of water. So the students never had to think about getting up to go. It would always be easily accessible, right? Modifying the environment to elicit the behavior that you want, which we touched on at the beginning. And sure enough, their water consumption increased by about 40%. 40%. And the only difference was that water was easily accessible. Now, you may not have the luxury of someone coming by and filling up your water pitcher, but if you get maybe a couple big bottles of water or a few small bottles of water, and you keep them close by, right, you're much more likely to increase your water consumption. You won't be as dehydrated, and your body will function much better, because water is fundamentally one of the most powerful tools you need for energy and for effective functioning. Now, the last tool I suggest you to use is a wireless headset. A wireless headset, a Bluetooth headset, you're doing remote conversations, remote meetings, and such. And the reason behind that is because it gives you the ability to stand up and move while you're on a call. But it has two benefits, right? One is, again, a health benefit, and then one is a professional benefit. From the health side, I just mentioned it, you're standing up, you're walking, right? You're moving around, more energy burn. Your body feels better when it's moving than just completely sedentary. That's the health side of it. From a professional perspective, research done at Stanford University found that when are thinking or they're trying to be creative, when they are walking, they are 60%, as they are walking, I should say, they're 60% more creative than when they're doing the same thing sitting. So again, when a person is physically walking, they are actually 60% more creative than when compared to if they were trying to be creative while they're sitting. And that just shows the benefit of walking, of movement, the increase in blood flow, the brain, the increase of oxygen to the brain. So you can kind of capitalize that simply by getting a headset and walking around the room while you're on a call. I have a colleague who is telling me that at her company, every week, the boss, what he does is he has his entire remote team, wherever they are in the United States, at the same time, as long as the weather is fine, they put on their Bluetooth headsets and they get out of their offices or their home offices and they all go out for a walk wherever they are, right? So they're all essentially walking alone, but virtually they're all walking together. They're still able to the meeting, right? But at the same time, they're getting the benefit of physical activity and that increase in oxygen to the brain, which enhances creativity by 60%, which will help you be more creative on those calls. So this is what I would challenge you to do to create a healthy home office. Please feel free to take a screenshot of that and then, grab a few of those, and perhaps that will help you change your environment, support a better remote workstation for you. So the next thing we're going to focus on is reducing Zoom fatigue, or reducing virtual video conferencing fatigue. And this is something that virtually everybody is experiencing because we're all on WebEx or Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever platform it might be, day after day, meeting after meeting after presentation, and it's exhausting, right? And this is research conducted by Stanford's Virtual Human Interaction Lab. And he said they found that just by doing these 4 simple activities, it'll reduce the strain on your body of prolonged bouts of just staring at the screen, watching these presentations and having these meetings. And it'll just reduce the overall wear and tear on your body, which will ultimately enhance your well-being. And the first one is just very simple: reduce the size of the screen, the virtual screen that's on your screen, right? Oftentimes we fill the whole screen with everybody who's in attendance of the Zoom meeting or the person that we're speaking with. Just minimize it and keep it in the side. That'll reduce it, right? Second is to hide the self view of yourself, especially in Zoom. You can always see a little picture of yourself. Get rid of that. You don't need to see yourself. You know what you look like. Just reduce the size of your screen and just look at the people or the person that you're speaking to. Next, right? Adjust your sit-stand desk, ideally. Again, they're reinforcing the benefit of sit-stand desk so that you can move around while you're on Zoom, right? For example, I am right now standing while I'm speaking to you. Whenever I'm on a virtual meeting, I'm usually standing, or I place a little bicycle underneath me, a stationary bicycle, and I can ride, right? I don't need to physically be sitting in a chair immobile the entire time, right? You don't have to do that either. Now, there are some meetings where you probably should sit or just be completely still, but often so many of these you don't need to. So just use it as an opportunity to get some physical movement in to reduce the overall wear and tear on your body. And then lastly, this may seem very simple, it's just to turn off your video camera, turn your head away from the video, and then just simply listen to the audio, right? Give your eyes a break. And these are just 4 simple strategies to reduce Zoom fatigue. Feel free to take a screenshot of this and then use it within your own personal workspace, or perhaps share it with your team. We're going to go next to how to conduct better remote meetings. And earlier I kind of told you an anecdote about a company, a biotech company that I did a workshop for. And the workshop was actually not about virtual meetings. I have to correct myself. It was about how to prevent effectively virtually, because everyone does virtual presentations now, but very few people do them well. And in the process of researching it, talking to the individuals, I found out that, you know, they also had something that was really bugging them about hybrid work, and that was remote meetings. And oftentimes the leadership has no idea about what these causes of angst or anger or frustration are unless they hear about them, right? And so here are 5 things that that I can share with you that'll ensure that, you know, your team members, your remote team members, aren't burning out, aren't silently angry at you, planning your demise because you're just giving too many poorly run virtual meetings. Now, number 1, the first strategy is to avoid stacking meetings. Avoid stacking meetings, right? We've all had colleagues or someone we got onto a Zoom meeting with or a video conferencing meeting who said, sorry, got to go, got to cut you off right now. And they jump onto the next one, jump, 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 jump. That may be okay with you. Maybe you're a person who's able to jump like that, but perhaps a lot of your subordinates or the people you work with cannot. You know, and the feedback that I got, for example, from this one particular biotech company about that is that it makes them feel stressed, right? Because they jump into the next one without necessarily having time to downshift from the previous meeting they were on and prepare for the next one, or at least give their mind a break before jumping on to the next one. That boosts their stress. And remember, they're already suffering from isolation, exhaustion, work overload, and now they're getting more and more unnecessary stress because meetings are packed back to back to back. So what I would challenge you to do is to put a 5-minute break either at the beginning or at the end of the meeting to serve as a buffer. But put it in and have it structured into your meetings so that everybody knows, right? Not just silently start 5 minutes later or start 5 minutes early. Just say, we're going to be starting at 5 minutes after the hour just to give everybody a transition time, or we're going to be concluding 5 minutes before the half hour or the hour just to give people a quick moment to go to the break or transition, mentally transition. That's a very powerful tactic, okay? Next is to limit the size of your group. Another big pet peeve people had was going to unnecessary meetings, right? With this switch to hybrid, what so many leaders, managers did is they replaced emails, they replaced a lot of other phone calls with virtual meetings. And so all of a sudden, all the team members were just overwhelmed with meeting after virtual meeting after virtual meeting. And it just became too much. And more often than not, they said, you know, I really didn't need to be on that meeting, right? So I would challenge you to start thinking about, okay, who really needs to be in this next meeting? And then invite only those people. And if there are people who need to know the information, consider recording your meeting so then they essentially get the information asynchronously, right? So there's synchronous information flow. Synchronous is essentially when you're talking to someone live. Asynchronous is when someone watches a video. So you can record some of your meetings and then share the link to other team members who don't necessarily need to be in the meeting at that time. And they can watch it on their own time, on demand, and allows them to give them focused time to work on other projects, right? That's a very powerful idea. Limit the size of your group. Next is to provide better visuals. And this is a huge problem with a lot of leaders and a lot of professionals, especially in remote presenting, is they way too much information on a screen, especially if they're shifting through a PowerPoint presentation, right? They go boom, 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 boom. The person who's your audience can't process that much information the same time, right? What a lot of people end up doing is they essentially put what amounts to be an informational brochure, what's meant to be read, like a PowerPoint brochure, a document, what's meant to be read by the individual in their hand or on their iPad or sorts, and they put that on the screen. And they use that as essentially their slide deck. And it shouldn't be. PowerPoint presentations online, when you present, conducting meetings, designed for the eye, not so much for to be read, right? It should be someone should look at it, get a quick idea of what you're trying to say. And then if they want to learn more, then they can go back to your brochure and read a little bit more. But create better visuals, lots of pictures, bigger font, right? Less words, a lot more contrast. Those are just simple ways to create better visuals. Don't make visuals an afterthought, make it a crucial component. Consider it just as important as body language, because so many people are visual learners. They learn from images, not just auditory. But if you have bad visuals, right, bad PowerPoint slides, the people who are visual learners, audio, and if you're monotone, if you're boring, if if it's hard to understand what you're saying, your message is going to be lost. Okay. Next, make meetings intentional. Make meetings intentional. And this was a big challenge that a lot of the professionals had. For example, this biotech company. You'd have a meeting that was scheduled to start at the top of the hour, and then it was meant to be finished 30 minutes later, but it went 40 minutes, 45 minutes, 50 minutes later. And a lot of that time, a lot of the reasons that happened was that people were very long-winded when they spoke, or there wasn't a clear structure, agenda of what needed to happen, or there wasn't someone in charge of that meeting, perhaps the person who called the meeting, who stuck to a strict schedule and said, you know what, we have to cut you off. Anything else we'll cover afterwards, right? Make them intentional. That way people don't get stuck in meetings that go 45, 50 minutes just because some people were long-winded, some people were not prepared, and so on and so forth. And a very powerful way to do that is just to create an agenda, mail it out at the beginning or the day before of your, so people have an idea, and then stick to the timeline, the strict timeline. At first, it may be a little bit challenging. It'll also help your leaders and your professionals and your team members become better communicators, because they'll learn to be more succinct in what they say, because they'll realize, well, we only have 30 minutes to cover this. I will shorten and condense what I'm trying to say to make it fit into that 30 minutes, versus them thinking, oh, we'll just go over and that'll be fine. Okay. So make them intentional by incorporating a meeting. And then lastly, be mindful of cognitive and physical fatigue when you have virtual meetings, right? Cognitive and physical fatigue. And this is kind of related to the last 4 topics I just addressed. So you have to imagine that throughout the course of any day, anybody on your team who you're talking to, or anybody, perhaps a vendor or some freelancer that you might be dealing, or contractor you might be dealing with in another country to help design the product, they've been sitting at their desk all day, probably meeting after meeting after meeting, working on complex information. And their brain only has so much power, right? So much energy. And just similarly, their body only has so much physical capacity, right? And so the more information you dump on somebody, the more difficult it is for them to understand you, right? The more meetings you provide, the more likely that at some point they're just going to tune you out, right? They're going to block you out, and they're going to say, you know, I can't listen to this just because I want to, but I'm just physically incapable. I'm just restless, and my brain is fatiguing. So I want you to think about this visual. So imagine at the beginning of the day, every day, your brain is running on a treadmill. Brain is physically running on a treadmill, trying to process everything it needs to do, has to pay attention, absorb information. And the more information it gets through the course of the day, the more and more that brain gets fatigued. And eventually in the day, the brain is going to get so fatigued that it's going to get off the treadmill and say, you know, I'm done running, right? And from that moment on, any information you provided, any work you try to do really kind of shuts down. It goes nowhere, because it has had cognitive overload. It's done, right? Think about that from a macro perspective, through the course of your entire day. How much information or work can a person actually produce effectively? And then also think about that in virtual meetings, right? How much information really makes sense to provide to them at that time? And then from a physical side, right? Many of you perhaps are over 35, 40 years old, perhaps, and you've been sitting a good portion of your life. And maybe you're old enough to now start feeling the ramification of prolonged amounts of sitting. Your back is starting to hurt. Your neck is starting to hurt. Your shoulders are starting to hurt, right? Your body's aching from just sitting there all day long, right? And what happens when your body starts to ache? Well, your attention turns away from whatever you're doing, and it focuses on alleviating the discomfort and the pain that you're feeling, right? And that's something else to keep in mind when you do virtual meetings. If it's 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, without any breaks, without anything like that, you have to realize that the people sitting there are getting antsy. They're getting uncomfortable. Their body is starting to hurt. And when that happens, they're going to stop listening to you. Okay. So again, really think about designing your meetings to be shorter, more condensed, stacked with breaks, and with good visuals. So that's how to design better remote meetings. Just take a quick read of this quote here. Our research shows breaks are important, not just to make us less exhausted by the end of the day, but to actually improve our ability to focus and engage while in those meetings. And that's the senior director of Microsoft. So it's not just me saying this, right? So the last thing we're going to be focusing on today is creating a culture of well-being within your company, right? And I'm not, because of time's sake, I'm not going to cover all of this, but I would just take a screenshot of this or just kind of read them off. And these are just some ideas that you can start thinking about introducing within your own organization that will help your employees and will help your company function better, because fundamentally the most important tool that they have access to, their brain and their body, is functioning effectively. Okay. And fundamentally, one of the most important things is mental health services. I would really challenge you to really look hard into getting mental health services or access to your team members, whether they're in person or remote. There's a lot of benefit to it, right? Increased loyalty, increased retention, decreased missed days, decreased exhaustion, ultimately better, happier, more productive people, right? The employers that get this right will have a more engaged workforce, greater employee retention, and better ability to attract top talent. And that's from Gartner, the Distinguished VP of Research over there. As I bring today's presentation to a close, I challenge you to really think about, as we transition from this old paradigm of largely face-to-face work to the hybrid model, where we're dealing with people who are working in an office and others working remotely, and we're just kind of balancing this work-life integration that we've all had to kind of embrace. I challenge you to really to put wellness and well-being at the forefront of a lot of your business's decisions and a lot of your practices, because that way it'll ensure that not only you perform at your optimal, but so will your employees as well. And ultimately, a productive and effective you, the leader, and an employee in an organization will ultimately lead to better outcomes for your clients as well. It's just good business. If you want to learn more about wellness and communication skills training, especially in the hybrid world, feel free to contact me. Here's my contact information here, and I'd love to talk to you and work with you. Thank you very much. My name is John Godoy.